At the end of this lesson, you will be able to reflect on your own identity as a teacher and to reflect on the meaning and position of teacher agency in your own practice. In March 2008, the Foundations for Learning project was launched in South Africa in response to the crisis in performance of learners in South Africa, especially in foundation phase. As a strategy for reform, this project proposed that teachers receive scripted lessons and assessment frameworks to guide teaching and learning. This response was inadequate to raise the quality of education. In 2009, the Ministerial Committee released a review on the implementation of the NCS. This report highlighted the difficulties and overload that teachers still experienced in implementing the NCS. In July 2010, the Minister of Education released a statement on curriculum implementation, indicating that the design features of outcomes and assessment standards would be repackaged in subject-specific ways to provide greater details on topics and assessments to be covered each term. The Curriculum Assessment Policy Statement, or the CAPS, which details what teachers must teach and assess for each grade and for each subject, will reinforce the NCS. This vision was that the aims, content and assessment requirements would be made more accessible to teachers. The curriculum reform discussed thus far focus on performance of the teachers, making provision for outstanding standards, accountability and emphasis on the marketability of education. It's shaped and driven by the government. In this context, both the status and agency of the teachers are limited, as teachers would have to perform according to very specific guidelines, in the view of some critics will constrain them. It is not only in South Africa that scripted lessons are seen as a way of teaching. Some schools adapt a curriculum, such as Success for All, Directed Instructions and Open Court, that require teachers to follow carefully laid out lesson plans to teach reading, mathematics and science in California. This prescriptive nature of curriculum reform has serious consequences for you as a teacher. With institutional pressure, it has the capacity to shape their practice and their identities in one-dimensional ways. This could mean more dispassionate and technical teachers. This means that you as a teacher could also use dominant ways of thinking, which narrows possibilities for understanding learners and practice with and for them. Ideally, you as a teacher have to act as an agent who pay attention to their sense of self, their identity, their knowledge and contextual influence that have an impact on their teaching. What then is teacher identity and agency? McLuhan suggests, identity should not be seen as a stable entity, in other words, something that people have, but something people use to justify, explain and make sense of themselves in relation to other people and to the context in which they operate. This implies that the teacher's identity is the way in which you see yourself in the teaching context. You, as a teacher, construct your identity in ways that relate to the developmental stages of learners and the phase in which they teach. This classic work of King in 1978 in British Infant Classroom showed how teachers held specific ideas about their work. It appears that teachers' identities in general are influenced by complexity of social, historical and political forces that shape their personal assumption about teaching. How you think and act is always shaped by cultural, historical and social structures that are reflected in the mediational tools such as the curriculum guidelines and standards set by the government. In simple terms, this means that you as a teacher form your identity because of political, historical and social context in which you operate. For example, elements of your identity as teacher developed also through the way in which you are required to deliver the curriculum. Agency is a complex term, but simplistically seen, it is not something that you can have. It is something that you do. Agency should be understood as a process of social engagement influenced by the past and orientated toward the future, and acted out in the present as a capacity to contextualize past habits and future projects with the contingencies of the moment. In this sense, it is greatly affected by identity. Teacher agency is the way in which you as a teacher act out your identity, including formal education and training and informal professional and personal experiences. Teacher agency is not an individual capacity. It is something that individuals have or do not have, but as something achieved in and through concrete context for action. The political situation in a country could, for example, have an influence on the way you as a teacher form your identities, and this contributes to the teacher's agency. Teacher agency influence and is influenced by the futures of curriculum reform. In this context, you as a teacher will adapt, adopt, or ignore the official curriculum and pedagogic mandates. Samuel argues that the decision you make as a teacher and the action you take are simultaneously the consequences of past actions and present contexts. This serves as a condition to further action. Your action as a teacher also relates to how you perceive your duties. Therefore, for you to function as an agent of change as a teacher, you need to be subjected to transformative learning. The achievement of agency also depends on existing cultures of thinking, working and doing, and on wider structural issues. Therefore, to promote teacher agency is not only a matter of teacher education and professional development in order to increase your capacity and capability of a teacher, but also requires attention to cultures and structures. Without attention to these two levels as well, it is unlikely that the call for you as a teacher to become an agent of change will affect a real transformative of educational process and practices. The logic of the curriculum is to move through learning cycles which sees the teacher-student playing three roles that reflect different degrees of teacher agencies. The role of the deliverer, the adapter, and the creator, and is able to move from one role to another through disruption and reflection. This also means that while playing these three roles, your teacher identity is a determining factor and influences the way in which these roles are played. The transformative learning process could result in increased teacher agency, as you as a teacher-student critically reflect on the inappropriateness of one-size-fits-all lessons with other teachers, plans and implement new, increasingly creative strategies. It is the intention of this module to encourage movement through the deliverer, adapter and creator roles. Till next time.